5, 4, 3, 2. What?
This is episode 20 of Dev Branch, Feeling FSE.
Feeling fussy.
Full site editing.
Fucking in my belly.
I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me at Jason Tucker on Twitters.
Trying to bring out the oh, that's me. Hey, I'm Sayreed at Sayreed Media, and I'm trying to bring out the fabulous.
And you all know who it is. It's your boy Jason Cosper, aka Fat Melonweg, back at it again on the world's most influential WordPress podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And that podcast can be found at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher, and all the other places that you listen to podcasts.
You have to subscribe to Dev Branch separately.
Yeah, you can totally subscribe to it separately. Exactly.
Because not Cosper. Because Tucker likes to make things complicated.
No, I just like to have, I want to say that we have a network, so we have more shows. There you go.
We do. We have a network. Here it is.
We have a network.
Hey, speaking of networks.
Yes.
We have a guest hailing all the way from Sweden today.
Hello, Carolina. How you doing today?
Introduce us.
Well, it's Friday. It's actually Friday evening here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weekend.
Yes. So my name is Carolina Nymark. I am a WordPress core contributor at Yoast.
Awesome.
So,
and you know that because on her Twitter handle, she's got the Yoast picture, which has been a thing for so long.
This amazing little avatar.
It's many places. I feel like I see them even out in the wild, like sometimes, like not necessarily about WordPress or something, and I'll be like, "Hey, that's a Yoast."
Yeah, they're easily recognizable.
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't think that the brand can ever really separate from it, or it would just be lost. Like, yeah. If you leave the company, do you have to leave the avatar?
I think so. I haven't asked.
Oh, okay.
Well, you don't want to ask.
No, don't ask. I'm not saying you should leave. I'm just saying that's a good employee retention technique. Sorry. You can't have your avatar. Anyway, let's
full site editor.
This full site editor thing, because can you tell us a little bit, Carolina, about your basically just where you're at with FSE?
Right. So in my day job, I do work with Gutenberg and with WordPress core. But about 2 years ago, I was watching, I think, might have been a live Zoom call about a WordPress release that was coming, and I heard a couple of words that sounded very interesting. And as a nerd, I went ahead and bought a couple of domains right away. Got
no way.
Very lucky
that doesn't happen.
and started fullsiteediting.com, where I started posting tutorials and guides, tips. Yep.
So basically, what you're saying is you're the epicenter of full site editing that's not coming from the core, the outreach team. that's basically the deal.
The basic information, then maybe yes.
Do you consider yourself
to contribute to the official documentation as well?
Oh, that's important.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself? I would guess that the answer is yes, simply because you registered the domain. But maybe you're just smart and clever for that. But do you consider yourself a proponent or an advocate of full site editing?
I don't think I ever, in the beginning, I didn't consider myself that way. And it's hard because, with COVID, we were isolated for a long time. So coming to WordCamp Europe this June was a bit of a shock and eye-opener because, all the people who recognized me and wanted to come and talk about full site editing and website and, the new features and,
So that means you were a reluctant representative, unintended.
Unintended, not reluctant. I think I do enjoy sharing information. I'm just hoping that the information that I do share is up to date and it's helpful.
Yeah, now there's all this pressure. You better get it right. Look me mad.
No,
but
so far you haven't led me wrong, because I've been going to this website and just looking for all the different things that just aren't showing up anywhere else, and it's like for like right now, it seems like whenever I do a search for anything full site editing, I end up at your site.
You're the
9 times out of 10.
beginner of full site editing. So
yeah,
that's a
I mean,
bona
it could be
fide.
the domain name, but it's probably the domain name, and I think you did a great job picking the domain name.
You know, using just SEO premium. Sorry.
Yeah.
And of course,
I
the
guess it would
age
be
is
bad
that
if
it's
you
been
weren't
there for so long,
indexing.
which means that it's gonna have a lot of content, including some that is older on the blog side. And
Oh, I can't hear you. Can you speak closer to your microphone?
oh, sorry, I apologize. I was saying that the site is, it's probably the oldest resource. So it does have content that is 2 years old and some newer and articles that keep updating. That's also amazing.
That's cool.
It's really interesting to me that when you came into it, you were kind of like, and I think that this is a really interesting thing that a lot of people have moved away from is, you kind of said you were a beginner when you started doing this. And people, when they would start a blog about something, would be like, hey, I found out about this thing. I want to learn about it. Let's learn together in public. Like, I'm going to put what I'm learning out there, and then maybe it'll be helpful to someone else. I remember when I started blogging, like way back in the day, and my more technical blog posts, there have been times where I've found like the content that I wrote as like something that I learned 5-10 years ago, and then I'm still like, oh yeah, what is it, what do you do about that? And then all of a sudden in the search results, like 3 or 4 down, maybe I should get on the Yoast Premium, is the thing that I wrote. And I'm just like, oh man, like that's so great. I think that it's really fantastic that you have been learning this in public and have been kind of become one of the de facto proponents and experts in the space just by taking that upon yourself to learn in public and show your work, basically.
Show your work. It's the same similar thing actually that Brigitte, who's BPH at BPH on Twitter, did with Gutenberg, right? In the Gutenberg Times. And she was like, this is the new, and I'm going to kind of, report on it with the newsletter. And now she's, I think she's working for Automatic, right? Like specifically about Gutenberg, so it's definitely still the world where you can do that. And that's kind of exciting, right? That like these new things are happening. And then you're able to kind of step into that space that isn't occupied by anyone yet because it didn't exist before.
We're living in a time where it's so hard to start a new property on the web, a new anything, and gain traction from that. It's hard to, you have a subject you want to write about, and unless it ends up becoming, it is something like this. More niche side of WordPress. I mean, it's not niche in that 40 whatever percent of the web is building on top of it now. Of course, we still have plenty of people using classic themes, not fully embracing the block editor and full site editing yet, but it's where the wind is blowing and getting in on the ground floor. I mean, good job.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. What would you say if you were, there's 2 questions actually. One, what would you say to someone, how would you explain full site editing to someone who, like as simply as possible, who's new to WordPress completely? And then how would you describe full site editing to someone who, say if, you were at a WordCamp or something and it was someone who does have that WordPress background?
I think it might actually be easier for a person who's never seen the old WordPress to adapt to start using blocks because they can't compare.
Sure.
Oh
find it difficult. I wouldn't be able, we can't really compare it to like a word processor or like Google Docs. We can't really compare it to Word because it is a bit unique to move these blocks around.
Like building blocks.
I would have to help them with you set up their menu, I believe, the navigation block, but how to explain it?
Don't start there.
I'm not sure.
That is a tricky one.
Yeah.
Which one? The
navigation? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
What's the most difficult part about that in your experience? Or why do you think it's difficult? Like code-wise?
As someone who's used WordPress, we used to have a larger navigation screen in the WordPress admin area. Mm-hmm. Away from our content, we would, add our links, add our custom links by just entering the text. Of course, still a bit limited when you move things around. We were able to drag it and drop it still. But now when you're trying to update your menu, the space is just too small. And also right now, there's a bug with the toolbars, which blocks the view of the menu when you're trying to edit, click on things.
Yeah,
as little things.
As they've moved to having like focus mode for the headers, the footers, I personally think that having a focus mode for just menus would maybe be a good idea to be able to, because like you said, it is a very small space. It's very compact that you're having to work with there. Mm-hmm. Having something where you could potentially zoom in focus mode on just your menu, that'd be pretty great.
Why do you think that's not part of, baked in if all the rest of it is able to do that? Just not known that was something that was going to be a problem, like, or just because menus are less important?
No, I don't think they're less important at all, but there's
so many parts.
There's so many parts in Gutenberg, and so many things that needs fixing, so many new features that need to be added, so much test. And actually not that many people with the knowledge to start contributing to something as complicated as a navigation block, or having to know where in the code base all these components live, where do I change, how do I move the toolbar for this block. It's not as easy to just stop by for 1-2 hours per week and try to work on this. It's not that easy.
Yeah. I try to explain that to my husband when I'm working, like, and he takes the baby and he's like, oh, just go get some work done for an hour, and I'm like, I can't do that. Like, you have to like get inside the code, and then you have to like hold it in your head and like move it around. Like, I can't just like pop in and like do a little something and then whatever. Like, that's just not how the work works. So I really get that in terms of just not being able to have a big enough chunk of time to even be able to start wrapping your head around, let alone the problem, let alone fixing the problem, right? It's like, because you have to do both of those things. Otherwise, then you have to get back into it again. So I think that's really interesting that like, it's just because of the newness of all of this, the amount of contributors who are even able to contribute, before it was a big amount and still a big amount who were able to contribute something and still a small amount contributed. But now there's a way smaller amount who can even contribute. And then the percentage of that, I feel like we're talking like not even like 100 people, right? Like I don't, a couple hundred people, maybe, like not in terms of, I guess this would count as being a core contributor. So we know how many core contributors there are, but
for every release, the number of contributors keep growing, right? We know that, which is amazing. Also because we as in WordPress changed how contributions are counted a little bit.
Right. That's
right.
Actually, not more contributions than code. So in that sense, we have improved.
Well, that's good, but it still doesn't add to the number of people who are able to contribute to the actual code base.
So one of the best ways to contribute as a developer, if you you're using WordPress with or without Gutenberg, you find bugs, I mean, please do report them.
Really, I mean, and I've heard this a lot, that just bug reporting is very helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then
I mean, that was one of the reasons why I was doing a little video series like on Twitch, where I just started like recording myself using FSE, and then cursing as I'm hitting one roadblock after another. And why doesn't this thing have, like for instance, having the hover state, the colors for the hover state, like that's something that's coming up. We were talking about that during the pre-show. Like there's those sorts of things where I'm just like, why is this not in this yet?
that's my question. Like, why are we waiting for hover state? Like, what year is it? This is like, I mean, the just margins and padding has been like I feel like we're literally just in the early years. Like we're taking the most basic stuff and leaving it out.
I want the link controls, but it's always a question about, okay, how much power do we give to the user? What should be the default? Should this be visible? Should it be hidden under a different setting? Do we need to enable it somewhere else?
Should underlines be defaulted on? I don't know.
Yes, links should be underlined.
So
but
I will.
Do you add a dotted underline or a blue color or a green color?
Right.
Those are the kind of settings that we are looking to add right now, right?
For sure. I will point out to kind of Say's point, something that I've mentioned several times is like I am not going to apologize for how slow sometimes development on Gutenberg can seem, but I would like to remind people who are just like, oh man, this is all taking too long. Like, what year is it? Why are we adding this? To just remember that
you're talking to me.
to you and to anyone else, that we are changing we're swapping out a whole engine on a plane while it's mid-flight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm still an advocate of landing the plane for a second. Like, that's just how I feel about it. Like, build the engine a little bit more before you start to switch it. Like, that's, I can't, I'm trying not to have like judgment about that, but it seems good analogy. I get so distracted by those. Just like, little thing comes up on the screen and I'm like, squirrel over there. I see it. Hello, squirrel. Yeah, I do think that there should be some of this basic stuff. If we're having the question of what should be surfaced to the users, like template parts, like sure, have some template parts, but don't worry about those link colors, because that's not what people care. Like, that's the problem. Like, I feel like the development for FSE is so developer focused, but it's intended to be for users. But the user tools, like the things that users want, which is like to change, the spacing on things, or to like change a color of a link, like that stuff is not there. But we've got, template parts and, alternative menus for various pages or whatever. And it's like, I think that for me is the big disconnect, that it's supposed to be user friendly, but everything is very dev, even just looking, even the layout of the structure of the template parts to a certain degree, even the structure of the blocks list thing. Does that have a name yet? The block list of blocks?
The list view?
Yeah, the list view. Yeah, I guess you call it list view. Even that it's like a file tree. It's like that is a very developer way of looking at a page or a structure. And it feels like that's one of the big disconnects for me, is that it's intended to be for users, but none of that simple user stuff at the top is being dealt with. So I think that's a lot of the disconnect, because if FSE seemed like it was for developers more, then it would make more sense to me, because then, busting out a little bit of CSS is not necessarily a huge problem. But as is, that's not something a user can or is going to do. And then we keep saying, oh, it's not ready for them yet. It's not ready for them yet. Okay, but it's in the software, and it's being launched. So,
well, it's for developers because it uses a JSON file. There's that. And it's for users because you can copy and paste blocks, because we're just using comments to encapsulate the block areas. So you kind of get the best of both worlds there, I guess. But
I have another question. Carolina, do you think of the block editor and the full site editor as being the same?
No, they do not technically work the same way.
Right.
For me, I would look at, you don't load scripts or CSS the same way. The site editor, of course, has header, footer, content, takes content from other parts of the website and shows it. It's in an iframe, which the block editor is not. I don't know if you saw the post on makewordpress.org. I think it was in the design team's blog. Some little film clips and some, explorations about how this UI can be unified so that we actually only have one editor. And that excited me. This is, of course, far into the future. I don't know how far, but probably, it's going to be next year. If any of these get implemented, it's easier to move between the different modes. Content or site. And it might only be 2 steps instead of now also having what we call the template editor. So there are 3 separate editors, right? Site editor, template editor, and the block editor. And it should just feel like one editor. It should be easy to switch with just one click back and forward. Easier to preview your sites in different ways.
I feel like the nomenclature of it is part of that problem, because I feel like people use FSE and the block editor / Gutenberg interchangeably. And to me, they're, like you said, that they're very different. They not just from a purpose, but structurally. The block editor feels so user-friendly. Like, this is what, you can move things around. Like, I feel like there's an intuitiveness to the block editor, to Gutenberg, that I've actually been a proponent of for a long time. And I feel like the full site editor has none of that. It doesn't feel, I guess you've got blocks within your template parts, but in order to get to that, you have to kind of wade through something that feels to me like Dreamweaver, or just like, like I'm in my Nova, code editor.
Yeah, I had that same problem where I was working with something in a sidebar, and I dragged something out of a template part into the actual page itself, not realizing it, and then going to another page that has that template part as well, and I no longer had that element that I dragged out. And I think I probably spent 2 hours trying to figure out what did I do wrong,
where did it go,
and how to make it right, and then go back and then come to find out that there's
it's
there's a little bit of a
what if you put a page block in the template editor and then put that template part on a page? Could you make a hole in the internet, do you think? I just it'll be one of those mirror things, but it'll just go forever.
Actually, we solved that bug already.
Okay.
It's all black hole.
Is that a bug or a feature?
Block.
Really?
In the blog editor, you can't add the post content block. You cannot add template parts inside the block editor.
Right.
For example, you could display a custom, I don't know how to say this in English, excerpt.
Yeah.
Yeah, short part of your content. You can add that as part of your
You could make an iframe and stick it in there if you wanted.
Oh no.
Yeah, you can use page block and
So do you think the reason why we have these essentially 3 separate editing systems that are in place is because the fact that we offered the royal we, I guess, offered up Gutenberg to the rest of the internet, and because of that, it needs to act as its own separate entity, and then we're just kind of stealing some of those things and using them in these other 2 editing.
Controversial take.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm thinking is the reason why is because we kind of had to have this thing, encapsulated by itself.
Yeah.
So I think it was in WordPress 5.8 that they enabled the template editor, which is where users, if the team supports it, does not have full site editing but can add their own page templates.
Right.
Okay.
And there, very, very few themes actually enable this. But
Right.
I think the reason was, I was just speculating, was because they had been hoping the full site editing had been further along at that point, and they added the the little small part of it that they could. But now
all the theme developers are just
the
waiting.
editors, which is at least, it might actually be too many. At least template editor.
And now we're proposing a navigation editor as well. So good job, folks. I'm glad we came together here to add yet another one.
Solving the world's problems.
What's the there's a word for that. Distinguishing? I can't think of one.
Bikeshedding.
What? Black shedding? What did you say?
Bikeshedding.
Bikeshedding. No, I don't know. Maybe. It's just that, you take things apart into, and then it becomes just, I don't know. I'll think of this word. I'm going to tweet it later. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, you won't get that wonderful word. So, all right. So we've got only a couple minutes here. Can you tell us and understandably, possibly speculating, but your vision of how the FSE is going to unfolds over the next couple iterations, and what you're excited about? Maybe.
Well, I mean, this week we finally have a date, right, for WordPress 6.1, which means that we have until September 25 to add features, which means moving features from Gutenberg to WordPress core. So we do have quite a bit of time to continue improving things. But
that's right before WordCamp US, huh?
No. Is it before WordCamp US? I thought.
No.
Is it after?
We have something called Feature Freeze, which is in September, and the release is in October.
Okay.
Because we have to have a month of testing in between.
I'm glad we learned that lesson. I feel like that's a good lesson to have learned, that we don't need to schedule the development around the conference. Right? That's good. Good job, everybody. Okay, sorry. Go ahead with what you're excited about.
We have improvements for block locking so that we can lock the inner blocks. If we have a group block, we don't have to lock the inner blocks individually. That's probably going to be in a couple of weeks. We have improvements to what's called Team JSON elements, which used to be able to style links and headings only. And these are elements that are not blocks themselves, but inside blocks, for example, in a very complex blocks with inner elements inside of it, like picture the latest post block that has both links and images and plain text in it. Now to elements, we're going to have captions and buttons. So for example, if you have a form with an HTML button, you will be able to style that without adding CSS to your style CSS file or whatever you might have been adding to your team.
Buttons. That's cool.
That's coming soon.
So I wonder how deep we have to get into that button configuration. Are we going to get the radius? We can select the radius that we get. Do we get to pick the whether or not it has a little this or a little that? How far down that rabbit hole are we going to go?
I do think board radius already works.
Oh, good.
We're also getting
embossed level.
In Team JSON, we are getting Hoover for links.
Nice. Yeah, that's going to be good.
But again, the UI is not ready for it. Hopefully, it's coming soon.
We're like, huh?
But Brian was excited about it.
Yeah, Brian was
very excited. When do you feel this is a total future prediction? No one's going to hold you to it. If you had to guess, when time-wise, not necessarily release-wise, but when time-wise, would you feel that full site editing is obviously not done, will never really be done, but when is it super solid? When would you predict that might happen?
Oh, I can't.
Oh, come on, just a little.
I mean, just
no one's going to judge you.
Just be wrong. It's okay.
Different things.
We're wrong all the time. Just be wrong.
For clients, yes, if it's a simple website. Would they do something super complex with it? Not this year.
Next year?
Okay.
2020.
If I want to create a lot of custom blocks, then maybe this year. Yeah. It also depends on if you plan to rely on having Gutenberg active, because Gutenberg changes and you would need to keep everything up to date.
With every release, it does get better. Like every new version of WordPress, it does get progressively better. I know that especially amongst the people like on the show right now, and maybe some of the nerdier folk listening or watching along, they want it right now. They want all of this stuff. They want it to be as good as Elementor or Divi or Beaver Builder, and it's not quite there yet. But 6.1, it's gonna make 5.9 look like training wheels, like and 6.2. Same thing. It's gonna keep getting better. I think the trick is we all just want it better right now. And it's not happening, so it's frustrating. So there's a lot of like wailing and moaning online from the people who want their.
No, I just want the update flag page to not tell my clients when it gets updated, hey, there's all this new stuff that you can have, when they can't have it. That's what I don't want. That's what I want to have stop happening. That to me that's what I would like to have stop happening.
Oh darn, we have to end on that note.
All
right,
sorry.
Well, I can one thing.
Yes.
If this excited you, if talk about this excited you, if you want to see where Gutenberg is headed and going, absolutely follow along with Carolina's site, but also every 2 weeks when a new release of Gutenberg comes out, Gutenberg Times does their changelog podcast. It's about an hour to an hour and a half long. And they do have some discussion, but they literally read the high points from the changelog in Gutenberg every week. Birgit and Mary Job both go through and talk it over and everything else. And it is super specific and super nerdy. It is by far, I quake in fear every time my wife gets into the car and I know that was the last podcast that was playing, because she's like, what are you listening to?
You are listening to someone read a changelog out loud. So, you know.
But it is very informative, and I'll make sure that we get that in the show notes.
Carolina, thank you very much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. And I hope you have a good rest of your night, and talk to y'all later.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
for having me.
Of course. Go over to WPwatercooler.com/subscribe to subscribe to this content. If you're just watching it for the first time, we'd appreciate it. Go over to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify.
Subscribe.
Go watch us on YouTube, and we also stream this on Twitch and Facebook. Talk
Get
to y'all
it
later.
live, get it live.
Bye-bye.
Subscribe.